Thanks. Let's get started. So thank you so much for all coming today. It's our first webinar of the year for ILG community, and it's on a really interesting topic of advocacy. I'm just going to let you quickly know about some events we've got coming up, just so you've got dates for your diary. So our next two webinars that we're taking bookings for at the moment, we've got one on disability related expenses, which is very popular so far, so do grab your space. And we've got Wellbeing and the Care Act also coming up, so how wellbeing principles can apply to your care plan. We have also got our main online event, the first one of the year coming up, which is employment rights with PA employers. And then we've just booked our first peer support session. So I'm going to put all the links and the dates in the chat, and they will be emailed out to everyone, so don't worry if you miss them. So that's all the things I've got to say. So I'm going to pass straight across now to Nick and Barbara. So thank you so much for joining us.
Great. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for inviting us along today. And we'll make every effort to make sure this is not death by PowerPoint, okay? And so you've got two real people here at least. But it's always helpful having PowerPoint just to keep us on track, but also to help you to sort of follow things through as well. We'll make sure that we send out the PowerPoint afterwards, so don't feel you have to scribble loads of notes as we go along. So my name's Nick Jeffrey, and I'm an advocate with Voiceability Advocacy. I'll talk more about Voiceability in a minute, and we are a provider right across the whole of the country and also in Scotland. And so I'm part of the advocacy team. With me is my very able colleague who will introduce herself.
Hi everybody, my name's Barbara, and like Nick, I'm also an advocate within Voiceability. I cover the Sefton region, so I'm up north, and as opposed to Nick is down south.
Indeed, I'm in the Hampshire area.
Yeah, shows how national we really are. So yeah, so happy to be here and thanks for having us, everyone.
Brilliant. So, and both Barbara and I are part of the national team as well. We're part of the high-level practitioner team, which means that we get asked to come along and meet wonderful people like you guys from time to time, because we're passionate about advocacy, and we're particularly passionate about making sure people know how to access advocacy and what advocacy is. Now, I don't use Zoom very much. I tend to use different systems. So I'm going to attempt now to share my screen, and hopefully you'll get something sensible up there. If you get a shopping list, then you know I've got the wrong one. So let's give it a go now and see what we come up with.
While Nick's doing that, could you say that there will be opportunities for questions if anybody's got them? I think we're gonna pop them in the chat box. Is that right? So that Jade can keep an eye on it for us and can interject whenever we need to, just to say if there's a particular question that needs to be answered. If not, we'll hold on till the end probably and answer them then.
So Barbara, is the screen being shared yet?
Yeah.
As you can see, and you can see the first slide.
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay, I can only see it on one of my screens. I need to make sure that I can shift it along as well. Goodness me, the joys of technology, or is it the incompetency of the person driving it? So let me have a look at this one here and see if that does not come up with. Okay, give me one moment. La 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 la. Aha. Okay, so I've just shot to the other one there. Brilliant. Okay, well, I'll make a start then. So I've got two screens. So if I'm looking sideways, it's because I'm looking at the screen that's got the PowerPoint, but I try and look forward every so often as well. So you're not seeing, I think this is my best side. Oh, I'm never quite sure. There's not necessarily a great side either side. So my name's Nick. This is Barbara with me, and we're introducing you to Voiceability Advocacy. Who are Voiceability? We've been supporting people to be heard in decisions about their health, care and well-being for over 40 years. So it's quite an old provider now. We believe that everyone, regardless of situation, illness or disability, has a right. And that right is to be heard and respected, to have choice, control and freedom, to be safe from violence, discrimination, harm or abuse. And I've got to say as well, we work without prejudice. That as advocates, we want to ensure that people we work with feel fully involved in particularly local authority processes, because we both know that often local services are things that are being done to us and not necessarily in partnership with us, and we can feel quite disempowered that way. And so probably the two big things for us would be, firstly, that people know what their rights are and their rights are being upheld, and secondly, they have a voice in whatever process that we are involved in, and we're alongside you. We always joke with our clients that we work for them, we work for you, so you can sack us if you don't want to see us. So moving on then. So everything we do is guided by policy, by principles, by the law, and we are watched closely what we do. So there's the Advocacy Charter, which we talk about a little bit about later, the Advocacy Code of Practice, legislation. And so I mentioned the Care Act just now. There's the Care Act year 2014. There's the Mental Health Act, which is revised, and also there's an Advocacy Code of Practice. And we are very proud also to have been received the badge of the Advocacy QPM, which is really we have to reach certain standards, a quality standard marker that we have. All our advocates are professionally trained and professionally monitored and supervised to make sure that we are doing the right thing for our clients. What is advocacy? Well, in the Advocacy Charter, it says that advocacy promotes social inclusion, equality, and social justice. It takes action to help people say what they want, secure their rights, represent their interests, and obtain the services they need. As advocates, we're independent, so we work alongside everybody. We work alongside health, social care, every other profession you can think of, education often, also alongside our clients. We're not owned by anybody, so by definition, as independent advocates, we can question, we can challenge, we can support, and at times we can report as well. And so safeguarding is something we are also very passionate about. We'll come to that in a few minutes' time. So, and I'm going to hand across now to Barbara to talk about the next section.
Okay, so the role for us as advocates is to support and enable people to express themselves. So that's making sure that they're able to express their views and wishes. So our role as advocates is to spend as much time as we need to, not as much time as somebody else says we should. It's about us spending as much time as we need to with the person to allow them to express their views and wishes in a way that's best for them. So as advocates, we're quite skilled communicators in ways of enabling people to be involved and to express what it is whether they're involved in an assessment or planning or reviews. It's about us spending time before professionals start asking lots and lots of questions of somebody. So if it's a review, we'll be spending time speaking to the person. Before the actual review starts, we'll be meeting them and spending time with them and gathering their views and wishes before a social worker gets too in depth with their laptop and their form to fill in. So we'll be exploring the options with people as well, what's available to them, the support networks they may have, what people can help support them to make their own decisions. So as advocates, as much as we're side by side with people, as Nick has said, another part of us is to help people to become self-advocates. So to empower people to have the information that they need to be able to advocate for themselves. We need to understand and support people to secure their own rights. As I say, that's that kind of self-advocacy part of it, that if they're unable to, then that's our role. But where possible, we do try to encourage people to speak up for themselves. So we will be sitting beside people, helping them rather than speaking for them. And to enable them, as I say, to advocate and represent themselves. So that's kind of it's not a mission, because for some people that's not where it's going to be. But that is kind of where we sit at. So next slide, Nick. So how do we work with our clients? I think I just kind of started to touch on that really. So we work in two ways, which is instructed and non-instructed advocacy. So if we're working with somebody it's instructed, basically we're saying that person, the advocacy is user-led. So we will take instruction from the person we're working with. We will always be gaining their consent before we do anything, before we speak to people on their behalf. We'll make sure that they understand what that will mean. But we will take instruction. So if we're asked, if we're given information, we're told not to share that, then we don't, if we're working in an instructed way. And we will contact people that we're instructed to contact. If we're working in a non-instructed way, this means that the person we're supporting lacks the capacity to instruct an advocate. And that means that we work more on a rights-based approach to advocacy. So we're upholding the person's rights. We're ensuring fair and equal treatment and access to the services that they need. We're making certain that decisions that are taken, all the relevant factors have been taken into account, and that will include advanced wishes as well as current preferences and perspectives that the person has. So in that point, we're a little bit of a Miss Marple, I think I like to describe myself as sometimes, working non-instructed, because you are kind of asking those questions, trying to piece together a person, trying to piece together from as many people as possible what might be in the person's best interest and what the person's views might be before if capacity was lost at some point. So it's an interesting way of working when we work non-instructed, but that's our other option. Next one, Nick. Yeah, so advocacy is a right. It's a fundamental right for everybody, and eligible people have the right to statutory advocacy. So Voiceability cover statutory and some non-statutory advocacy, depending on our contracts across the country. So people, as I say, eligible people have the right to statutory advocacy. So that might be under the Mental Capacity Act and the Care Act, which state you must refer eligible people for advocacy. The Mental Health Act states you must, again, be aware of people being able to access advocacy when they're on the wards and detained. And the Children's Act say you must refer eligible children for advocacy.
And we are always amazed that we work with professionals, we work with clients, the number of people that either do not refer to advocacy, or better still, they wait a long way into the process and then involve us because things become very complicated and we have to unpick things. It's not unusual for us to in partnership with the client, at the request of the client, ask for another assessment meeting or another review because one's taken place without advocacy present, even though the client may have some difficulties in participating. And so, as you said earlier on, it's so important that that everyone has the opportunity to have a voice, that reasonable adjustments are made by professionals to enable and allow participation. And for us as advocates to be alongside our clients to ensure they are fully informed, to make the best decisions about things. They feel they've got a full voice on things. They don't feel they're having services done to them by other people. And also for us as advocates, it's about people feeling as though they're being empowered and we're not just there to kind of do it for them, but helping people to be more active. And so our success criteria as advocates often is when our client sacks us, because they don't need us anymore. They can do it for themselves. And so I don't know about you, Barbara, but I'm regularly being sacked and I have to live with that. And, you know, and man up a bit and get on with it, move on to the next thing. So we've said a bit about what advocacy is. It's really important that we know what advocacy is not, because otherwise professionals will try and bend us into what they want us to do, particularly in an age when services are being cut so drastically, where there are so few social workers, there are so few qualified social workers. In my county, in Hampshire, they're inviting people to offer up themselves for redundancy who are highly qualified, because they're so qualified the local authority can no longer afford to pay them, and they're bringing in people that are there as assistants, support workers who perhaps don't know much about social work or don't know how to engage with clients. And so increasingly advocates are finding themselves put into situations that really aren't their role. So we're not a replacement for appropriate services. We're not a counsellor or a befriender. We're not a legal advice team. We're not mediation. We're not telling you what to do and what decisions to make. And so if we're supporting any processes, it's not about what we think. Advocacy is all about you. None of it is about me. And so not only are we non-judgmental, but making sure that our own personal views on things are not clouding a situation. So even if we're supporting a client, perhaps make a decision that deep down we might think may not be the best for them, we'll support that decision unless they're putting themselves or someone else at risk, which sometimes can happen.
Yeah, I must admit we do. The classic saying for me certainly is, as you know, as an advocate, I do not have an opinion. I don't have an opinion. I only have the voice of the person I'm supporting. So if a social worker or anybody says to me, "What's your view on this? What's your opinion?" I don't have one. I will reinforce and reiterate the information is I've been shared from the client, from the person I'm supporting.
Brilliant. And I've gone back to one slide because I'm just smiling at the telling it. Advocacy is not telling health or social care professionals what decisions to make. We do, however, sometimes feel like we need to be telling them what they should be doing because they're not doing it when they should have done it. And particularly when it comes to involving the client, involving people, and sometimes just being a bit human as well. And that old term about bedside manners. Sometimes professionals can be quite brutal with you, and particularly if it's about looking at care needs or support needs or all sorts of things, placement planning, whatever it might be. There should be a human side to it. It's not just about understanding. It's also feeling as though they're not being picked on, which sometimes people are. Safeguarding, so important. It undergirds, underpins, it's the centre of all that we do. So all our advocates are trained to respond to all safeguarding concerns appropriately by reporting these to the local authority. So if we become aware of a situation or if something's disclosed to us, then we will, if it's confidential and a client's disclosed it to us, we will discuss with them what action we need to take. But we will take action if somebody's at risk, if they're at risk, somebody else is at risk. And we do approach the local authority. And if we do report the safeguarding, we do ensure they come back with a response to that as well. And either that safeguarding is proceeded with by the local authority, or they don't proceed with it, but we make sure there's a very good reason why they have not proceeded with it. We have ongoing training for that. We have a safeguarding lead for the organisation. All of our team managers are points of contact around safeguarding, because in some situations we are perhaps the only outsiders that are going into places, into care homes or into homes, into hospitals, into mental health units, into secure units, into prisons, or just simply working one-to-one with people. Sometimes we're encountering situations that have become very dangerous or very upsetting for the individuals, and we have to call it in. And so, if we see something, we call it. It's really important to do that. And our guys get ongoing training as well, because that's really also important to keep up to date with all safeguarding things. And for all of us as advocates, we don't know it all. And sometimes you see a situation, you're not sure about it. We make sure we discuss it with a colleague or a manager. And even if, we put a safeguarding in and then more information comes out, we will not sit by and let things go past. Okay, so types of advocacy, what we actually deliver. I can't remember, Barbara, how many slides have I done now? Whose turn is it now? Should we do one more?
Go on then, off you go. Carry on.
Okay, one more. What's going to come first? Well rehearsed we are. We've been practicing for weeks on this one now. Yeah. More of a pantomime than a Shakespearean play, this. Okay, types of advocacy. There are different types of advocacy, each with a different eligibility criteria. Statutory advocacy types are available everywhere, but other types of advocacy are unique to a particular local area. So here's the cut, guys, and this is, please do hear this, that, Voiceability, we've got quite a widespread of where our teams are. We're not throughout the whole of the country. Advocacy is the right of individuals. And so if it's not us, it will be someone else. And so if you're not quite sure who your advocacy provider is in your area, then contact your local authority and ask them. And it should be on their website, and also showing you how you can self-refer, If in doubt, ask a social worker. If still in doubt, go online and check that out. And if you're still in doubt, you'll see it in a minute. Give us a ring and we'll tell you. And if it's not us, we'll tell you who it is. So we're here for that reason. So it's everywhere. General advocacy has got a local variation, but we offer short-term issue-based advocacy. Although it's issue-based, it is client-focused. And I would also say that although we deal with issues, for us, the issue isn't the most important thing. It's the outcome. It's the final kind of part of it that's the most important thing. So all of us have issues all the time, things going on. But what we try and do is focus on perhaps the bigger picture. The bigger picture may be the relationship with the local authority, or the issue may be that you're still waiting for a review, it hasn't come through, whatever it might be. So not just about issues, but also about the big overview, because we want you to be empowered. So, okay, back to Barbara now.
Can I just cut? Yeah, I was going to cut in there as well, because when we talk about issue-based advocacy, I tend to see it for myself as a person, as an advocate, is that it's process-based. So it's the process that's ongoing rather than the issue. An issue to me feels like there's a problem to be solved, and once we've kind of been in and that we tick a box. For me, it always feels like it's process based. So if it's statutory advocacy, if there's a review going on, that's the process. It's not an issue, it's a process. It's something that happens whenever it needs to. A review happens, it's a process that the local authority are carrying out. So I've tried in my head to kind of reframe that a little bit, so that it feels kind of more like what it is we actually do, rather than, but in terms of our commissioning teams, they would still call it issue based. So yeah, that's just my take on that. So quick whiz through, I think this is going to be on the statutory advocacy that we offer as an organisation. So the first one is the Independent Mental Capacity Advocate. So this is working under the Mental Capacity Act. And we're called IMCAs for that, an Independent Mental Capacity Advocate. And we support somebody who lacks capacity and does not have anyone appropriate to consult with particular best interests. So does not have anyone appropriate to consult. Appropriate is one of those weird words, as we all know, it's quite ambiguous sometimes. And for us, it tends to be the person making the decision, whether it's a doctor or a social worker. They're the ones who kind of deem who's appropriate or not. As an advocate, we might challenge whether or not, if we've been involved and there is family, as to why it is they're not appropriate to be consulted. And we will get involved in long-term accommodation decisions. So this is somebody who's going to hospital for more than 28 days or to another accommodation for more than 8 weeks. So we're not talking about somebody who's in hospital and is on what's called now the short-term discharge to assess beds for 28 days. We're talking about people who are making a long-term accommodation. So this is going to be their home or the place they're going to stay for an extended period. We will also get involved in serious medical treatment. So the decision about giving or withholding or stopping treatment. And that does include DNA, CPR, and also dental treatments as an outpatient. So we'll also, serious medical treatment can be anything that involves, it's not about going to the doctors and having a health check. It is more about an operation, a procedure, an investigation that might require sedation. We might also get involved if sedation and a safe hold are required for a piece of investigation to take place. Safeguarding's on there, but a lot of safeguarding these days is covered under the Care Act, but there is a responsibility under the Mental Capacity Act for that to happen. And as advocates, we have to write a report that must be taken into consideration by the professionals that are making the decision. We will also make recommendations within that on possible options and challenge any weird options that might appear or options that feel very restrictive for somebody. So, right, Nick, anything else to say?
Yeah, well, it's just interesting, isn't it? That so we said we're not decision makers, but the IMCA role is a key part of it. Although the decision is not our final decision, whether it's about a change of accommodation or serious medical treatment, our report must be taken into consideration. And our report is very much as as much as possible anyway, from the perspective of the person that we're there about. So that report is if they do not have capacity to talk to relatives, to find out their background, their situation, to learn as much as we possibly can about them. And it's almost as though we are writing a report as though it was us facing that particular predicament, either change of accommodation or going to hospital. And that report is then put alongside all the other decision making tools. And a best interest decision is made by the professionals off of that. But we're not the decision maker, but we do give recommendations based on what we found in the IMCA reporting role. And so that's kind of a different area. Back to Barbara.
Yeah, so IMHA, so as an independent mental health advocacy, so this is supporting people with issues relating to their mental health and care, the treatment, and helping people understand their rights under the Mental Health Act. So we would work in this role with people who are detained under the Mental Health Act, or are subject to a community treatment order, guardianships, or are being considered with Section 58A treatment. I'm looking at you, Nick, like Section 58A?
Yeah, I'd need to double check that. I'm pretty sure I know the answer to that, but I don't want to. Just give me a moment.
It's professional referrals and self-referrals that are accepted as well on this count. So I work as an IMHA, and so does Nick. And we will attend or appear on wards, I think is the best way of describing it. And people can self-refer and say, I'm on Section 3 of the Mental Health Act. I would like some support with my care and treatment, or with going to a ward review, speaking to the doctors. I don't feel safe on the ward. It can be a range of things that we do, and it's around people's rights under the Mental Health Act whilst they're being detained on the wards, or with those other options of community treatment orders and so on.
And Section 57 treatments is where a second opinion is being sought. I thought it was that. I just wanted to double check that. So, okay, here we go. And actually, if I can say, based on that, as advocates, we deal with a very wide range of things, and we're not experts in everything. We all have different skills within advocacy, and so I'm trained to work as a mental health advocate, as a Care Act advocate, with children and young people, with older people through being their representative, and also general advocacy. And so we have different areas, but even then, we don't have all the answers for everything. But our role as an advocate is to find out answers, find out things, research it, and come back with things that we found. So, okay, are we ready to move on? How many slides? You're just doing one more now.
Your turn.
My turn now. Okay, what's coming next? Ooh, very exciting this. I'm going to Care Act. Phew. Okay, so Care Act advocacy. Okay, what is it? It's supporting people to understand their rights under the Care Act and to be fully involved in a process that is happening. When to refer, so professionals can self-refer when all three conditions apply. One of these processes taking place. Firstly, that there's social care needs assessment taking place, or a carer's assessment, care planning, care reviews, and safeguarding reviews. All right. The second part of it, so all three's got to apply here to be able to have an advocate under statutory advocacy. So that process. Next one is that without support, the person will have substantial difficulty.
What's happened?
Okay, we all right? Okay. Substantial difficulty being involved. And thirdly, there's nobody appropriate, able, or willing to support the person's active involvement. And so with Care Act advocacy, often we're working with a person that has barriers to understanding a process. There's a social care process taking place, and there's no one else that's really appropriate for a whole wide range of reasons. Sometimes because a person close to them doesn't feel able to make independent decisions. Who can refer? Care Act referral should be made by a social care professional, but can be made by anybody. We require the details of professionals completing the above process. So in other words, if you feel that you need a Care Act advocate to support you through a process and you meet that criteria, you can self-refer, you can ring our helpline, we'll show you in a minute. You can go onto the website, we'll show you in a minute as well. But you would need to speak to a social worker or a professional just to finally sort of verify it, to give it that rubber stamping. And we encourage self-referrals, because earlier on we both said that sometimes professionals forget to ask for advocacy, and clients don't know it exists, they can't ask for it. But if they are aware of it, then certainly come and find us. And if it's not our service, we will find out who that appropriate provider is. And this, Care Act advocacy is so important. It's about the quality of life. It's about being as independent as possible. It's about having the equal fair rights that other people have. And again, we keep saying that often, particularly with the Care Act process, it feels as though professionals are doing it to people rather than in partnership with them. And we want our clients to be fully participating, to have an opinion, to have a view, and ultimately to be happy in what decisions are being made. And people normally are happiest when they feel they've been involved and part of that process.
Can I just say something as well around the Care Act advocacies? Is the little loophole in Care Act with regards to about family being involved is if you have meet the criteria, but the thing about the appropriate person is if a member of family is expressing their views and their views are stronger, they're expressing their views and not the views of the person they're supporting. As much as we're not mediators, as we said at the beginning, which is we're not there for mediating between the local authority and family. What we can be there for under the Care Act is if family members are speaking about what they want for the person they care for or who they're supporting, but they're not expressing the views of the person, then the person would be eligible for a Care Act advocate. So you might say, well, they've got family, but if all family are talking about is what they want and not what the person is saying that the individual wants, then they are entitled to an advocate under the Care Act.
Yeah, brilliant and really important, really important. So NHS complaints, it's not an area of advocacy that I am directly involved in, but also known as independent health complaints advocacy. And what do NHS complaints advocates do? Give people information about different NHS complaints processes, because complaining sometimes is really, really important. Help people understand the different options they have in raising their concerns, to offer people support, to help them think about the complaints and what they want to get from making a complaint, and also to help people make a complaint if they require support. Advocates cannot write the complaints letters for people, and so our advocates are alongside that person, supporting them through a process. Now, Barbara, did you say you are an NHS complaints advocate?
No.
Okay. So the team are brilliant, and it's a real support, because sometimes we have something done to us, health related. We're very unhappy with it, but we don't have the confidence to challenge it and question it and start a process. And so we can support with that, and a referral can go in, and you have an advocate working alongside you through that complaint.
I think it tends to be more remote support, but I might be wrong.
Okay, and finally from me, children and young people's advocacy, and a lot of a lot of young people do meet the criteria for that. So Children and People's Advocacy, I'm giving an example for Hampshire because we don't have every area, the whole of the country does have a provider for children's advocacy, and we provide some of that service. But we look after, we work with children that are looked after by the local authority, in this particular case, Hampshire County Council, but it also includes children that are placed in children's homes out of area. We work with care leavers, those that have been in care, been growing up in care, and have up to the age of 25. We work with them as they're moving out into the world, going to college. There's also a care leavers team as part of that. We work with children on the edge of care. Now that would be families and children that are open to local authority because of family crisis, because of challenges, perhaps because of safeguarding. And edge of care means that without that intervention, a child may well end up in care. And, you know, as advocates and as local authority, where it's all possible and where it's safe, it's far better that a child stays with that family unit, whatever that family unit looks like. And so edge of care just means the support is in place from local authority to ensure they are as safe as possible. We work with secure children's homes, and so for us in Hampshire, we have one called Swanwick Lodge, and really it's for children that have got some level of criminal record. They are also in care, but they're just not safe in a children's home. And so the secure children's home it's not a prison, but there are restrictions in place. And we make sure we work in there because their rights are the same. In the same way, we work with young people that are detained in the Mental Health Act. So we work with children in secure units that are detained in a Section 2 or Section 3 or forensic sections where they've been arrested but have an impairment of the brain. And we make sure their rights are being upheld, they're safe, they're getting the help they need. And also they've got a right to appeal as well, and we support them through that appeal process. We support them through tribunal process when they're looking at potential discharge back into the community. And also, well, not just with children, but also with adults, we support with the planning ready for returning back to the community, because that's also very important. And we work with special educational needs in schools and colleges, and again up to age 25. So the children's advocacy, very broad, very important, because otherwise, you know, often children do not have any kind of voice. Okay, back to you, Barbara.
Yeah, so the next part of advocacy that we deliver in the statutory sector is what we call a relevant persons representative. It's a mouthful all on its own. This is what we call non-instructed advocacy. The people that we're supporting have been assessed as lacking a capacity to make a decision, and that decision is about where they live and the care and support that they receive. And so in order to make sure that the people tend to often live in care homes, it's usually a care home setting, and people will have what we call restrictions, so like the door will be locked, there'll be staff knowing where they are all the time. And what happens is what adults is just deprivation of liberty safeguards is put in place. So this is to safeguard the fact that somebody's been deprived of their liberty. They're not free to move and live somewhere else. They're under constant supervision. People know where they are at all times. Parts of their lives are being controlled. And so an advocate is required under the Act to visit the person regularly, to check their views, speak to them around their views and wishes, and to see how they feel about where they are. Are they being well cared for? How do they feel about it? Do they like the care home? And to check that the care setting is keeping up any conditions of the authorisation. So there might be something that they're called a best interest assessor, but it's been decided that it might be that it's for somebody to have regular contact with the family. It might be to make sure that the person has extra hours allocated, that time's being used well. So as an RPR, we would be going into the care home on a regular basis and checking up that those things are happening. We do have necessary things to do, which is to request a review of the authorisation if we don't feel like it's meeting the needs that it should do, or to request an application to the Court of Protection to get something changed. And even when someone can't tell their RPR what they want, we will use a range of approaches to establish views and wishes as far as possible and secure their rights. So if somebody isn't able to tell us, that'll be about us spending some time in care home, being with them, observing them, seeing what's going on, seeing what their interactions are like. We might have to look at care reports, daily notes to see if there's anything recorded, if there's behaviour plans in place. So and we can be involved with somebody for up to 12 months on any one authorisation. So we can be with them for quite a long time as an advocate, and obviously these things are renewed every year or at the end of an authorisation. So I've been supporting people in their care homes for 4 or 5 years at a time now. So we do then develop a lovely rapport with people, and we kind of get to know them, and can make sure that any changes in their needs are being adapted and the care home's being able to work alongside them. So referrals from this will always come from the DOL's office. So it's the Deprivation of Liberty Safeguard team at the local authority, or a social worker if they're seeking 1.2 rule in the community. So that's somebody who's deprived of the liberty safeguards, but they're living in the community in, say, supported living, for example. That's a whistle-stop tour for RPR, which is a lengthy, wordy piece of kit. General advocacy, I think, does this cover the Hampshire team, Nick? Did you want to cover this?
Yeah, I mean, general advocacy is not available on all of our contracts, but it is there for some. So adults with learning disability or autism who are known to Hampshire County Council, or those where advocacy support would prevent their care needs becoming more serious or delay the impact of their needs, and do not have a suitable other person to support them. So it's similar, but the general advocacy bit of our work, where we have the chance to do it, is so important, because, and you know, I know nothing or little about any of you here today, but sometimes people seem to slip in between the nets or the floorboards almost, and miss out on things, and particularly those with autism. And so we have got some funding to enable us to support them through those processes. Also people with LD who are parents and whose children are subject to child in need or child protection processes and proceedings. So we work with parents with autism and disability who have their own children, to help them through a process. People with learning disability or autism require advocacy to help them express their views about housing, tenancy, or environmental health, and sometimes that can be quite a challenge. Okay, and community mental health advocacy. Again, that's not everywhere, but well, we just need to see the news to know that you know, mental health is something that's spoken about a great deal nowadays. There are huge numbers of people with undiagnosed mental health issues that need support, and people with mental health conditions that are living independently, living in the community. And so advocacy support will prevent their mental health needs from becoming more serious or delay the impact of their needs. For clients living in the community are already or eligible to use secondary mental health services. It's a real tricky one, this one, because there's such a waiting list in community mental health. It takes such a time to access the services required. But you know, we as a team, where we have community mental health advocates, will work alongside people to ensure they are accessing those services in a timely fashion. There are big gaps in that service. and so often we are, really struggling to help people to get through things. And we will do that, and obviously you can link up with other areas of advocacy as well. Okay, so the last little bits of it, and thank you so much for bearing with us. So we'll make sure all our details are available to you afterwards. There are 3 ways of contacting us, or 2 ways of contacting us, really, I suppose, but via the helpline. And so there are online forms you can complete, and if you're confident and got access to a computer and are able to complete it online, then all the details are on that. And you can do that by email. Our website, www.voiceability.org. It's an ever kind of developing website, but it is accessible. Or you can simply phone the helpline, and they'll talk you through things. And what we would say is, even if you're not sure if you meet the criteria or not, give the helpline a ring or contact the helpline. They'll help you through that process. And if we can't provide a service for you, we will signpost you and make sure you've got information that you require. So that's us. I'm now going to hand back to Jade, who's going to help us through with any questions, and I'm going to get rid of this PowerPoint as well now. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. We have got quite a few questions because we had some pre-submitted as well. Let me just put the spotlight on so people can see me. Okay, so I've tried to group them into sort of subject matter. So the first one is all around being referred in the first place. So there's a couple of similar questions. I'll ask them both because they might have slightly different points. So the first one is, what happens if your social worker refuses to refer you? The second one is, while someone may present as being able to advocate for themselves, when you are fighting for your own care, other factors come in like stress, fatigue, pain, anxiety, and it often feels like social workers put people in a box. What do you do if you're told you have capacity and don't need an advocate, or you don't have a learning disability and so don't qualify for one? So there are 2 different reasons. One was given in the chat about not having capacity, or them having capacity, sorry, and the learning disability was someone submitted. So yeah, so what happens if you're being refused a referral?
Brilliant. Well, if I talk about the referrals bit first, and then Barbara can chip in as we go along, and perhaps Barbara, you can work on that one, that the second part of the question just now around arguments about capacity. If you've got a social worker and you've already part of a process, then if they're refusing, you can, well, there are 2 things you could do. You could complain directly to social services, because if you do meet the criteria, then you can question that. You can also refer directly to us. And so in a sense, we could take up that argument on your behalf, because if you contact us, look, I'm going through a social care process at the moment. I've asked the social worker if I can have an advocate. They've said no. Then we would speak to that particular local authority, get some clarity on things, and if need be, we challenge that situation as well. We will always, where at all possible, provide a service and provide the advocacy required. And but obviously there are certain restrictions for statutory advocacy, or it may well be through the general advocacy route instead. Barbara.
Yeah, that's just what I was thinking with regards to kind of having capacity. There's having capacity and having substantial difficulty, which is a nitty gritty, I think, of some areas. Certainly under the Care Act, you would need to have substantial difficulty. I think if you can argue that the stress, the pain, and the other elements that make it up actually put you in the category of substantial difficulty, then I think you still have an argument for a Care Act advocate. And I think that's worth challenging. And I think that's worth, as Nick said, if you're not getting anywhere, self-refer to Voiceability, and we'll see what challenges can be made on your behalf to see if you can be kind of, find that representation somewhere. If not, then it would be fall under the general advocacy support. But that varies so much from area to area as to what your local authority has commissioned. The other option, of course, is to see if there's a peer support group or anything like that in the local area that might be able to offer you some support through that. Does that answer?
Yeah, there's also a second part to this still on referral, which is that your social worker is saying that you have a friend or family member that could be your advocate. That friend or family member doesn't want to be your advocate, nor do you want them to be, and they don't know anything about the Care Act. This is something that actually happened to me as well. My social worker was very adamant, you have a parent, therefore, end of story. So yeah, I'm quite interested in the answer to this one, because I think a lot of people are just being told because that person exists, whether you want them to be your advocate or not, tough luck kind of thing.
Well, it's about that appropriateness, isn't it? It's willing, able, and appropriate. And I think as a person that's going through a process, if you feel that that person is not appropriate, it might be you feel they're not appropriate because they're giving their views and not your views. Or it might be that your relationship with that person isn't great. Or I think the bit around because they're not best equipped knowledge wise is a tricky one, but even with that one, they start with the latter one. So if you said about a parent, so if your parent, if you feel your parent is not the most knowledgeable about Care Act, and they contacted Voiceability and said, look, I can represent them, I don't have enough information, we would furnish you with that information. At very least, we do that. But also, actually, as a client, if you do not feel comfortable with the person that is meant to be there for you, it is actually all about you. It's not about me. It's not about your parent. It's not about them. It's about you. And so you should have the ear of a social worker over that. Because if you're feeling distressed or uncomfortable, and actually, as an individual, so if it was me going through that process and I was really uncomfortable with the person that's meant to be there representing me, then I would become dysfunctional in that situation. I would become anxious, I would become stressed, I would have to leave the room. I would not be able to participate in that meeting. And all these things happen, and you see it, and that's the very reason why that person needs to have an advocate. And so we would go back and we could support you to go back and challenge and question that. But if you're going through a process and there should be no real barrier to having advocacy available. And what I haven't said, and I'm sure you must already know it anyway, but having an advocate does not cost you any money. The service is for free for those that meet the criteria in this broad sense. And by law, the local authority must be offering that service to those that meet the criteria. And so actually, social workers are often law breaking because they're not offering it out. And so we are very strong about that. And so that would be another area for you to challenge. So I think in a nutshell, if you feel the person that's meant to be supporting you is not supporting you, then you should meet the criteria to have an advocate. Around capacity, well, the capacity issue, so we've already talked about distress, anxiety, the barriers that are created by things that you might be as clever as can be, and you might be well qualified, but actually if you're going through levels of high anxiety, or you're going through trauma, then, because that's another big area, isn't it, then that becomes a barrier. And we would certainly, as a provider, want to be able to support people that are clearly evidencing barriers to their participation in the process. And we'd much rather be alongside you, enabling you to be part of something, than having to go to a meeting with someone that's making you even more distressed and even less involved.
I just want to say as well, as a person being supported, is you do have a right to say that you do not want a family member to be your advocate, to advocate for you or to support you. You do have that right under the Care Act to state that this is not what you want, and therefore the social worker has to listen. And if they're not listening, then if that came to me, my first point of call would be to be making a complaint against the social worker, because they're actually not listening in the first instance to the person that it is that they're supporting through a process. So to me, that's automatically going into complaints realms already, just and a challenge, definitely, because as the person who is going through the process, you have the right to choose who it is that advocates for you. If you don't feel that the family member is appropriate and the family member doesn't want to, or your mum, your nearest, your dearest, your friend, they may want to, but you might not want them there. You still have that right to say, no, I don't want them to be a part of it, and I want you to find me somebody different.
And sometimes it is safeguarding as well, because we do encounter situations where other people are controlling the life of the individual, controlling their finances, controlling decision making. All the professionals are compliant with that and go to the person that's controlling rather than actually to the client. And that in itself can be deeply disturbing, deeply distressing. So we try and look at everything at an individual level.
Thank you. Right, we've got about 8 more questions.
8?
Is it okay?
Good gracious me.
3 minutes.
Yes. So, okay, right. So the next few are all on wait times. So if the waiting list is 6 months or more when someone's desperate and has been referred, why doesn't the council use 2 or 3 companies so that everyone in need can have one, especially if you need safeguarding urgently to prevent harm that is being ignored? Do you do it in order of referral or order of need? So again, all on the same topic. I have autism and I've been on the list over 5 months, and I have at times come to harm over something I've been fighting for over 4 years, causing meltdowns, harm, and with autism, not being contacted or given a time scale causes even more harm. And the third question on the same topic, wait times. I was referred for advocacy during my review. The review has now completed and I've still not heard from the advocate. Is this normal?
Well, it shouldn't be happening. I'm really, really sorry.
So if it's voiceability, I can only apologise, because that is far from beyond our normal standard of work. With regards to a safeguarding, we have a list of priorities. We have cases that are prioritised. So safeguarding cases, Section 42 inquiries always are dealt with first as a matter of urgency. So they never sit on a waiting list, certainly not in my team. They are allocated within a week of us receiving them, but within days, less than a week. Normally it's about 3 working days, I think it is, that they actually get pushed out to us. They get allocated, and as advocates, we will rearrange our calendars and diaries in order to make sure that we are going out and starting that process with somebody to support them as soon as possible. It is definitely a priority, as are discharge from hospitals and long-term accommodations and serious medical treatments.
Okay, thank you. Right, the next 2 are on sort of the background of an advocate. So the first one is there a specific qualification needed to be an advocate? And the second one is, does your advocate need to have had training on the Care Act? This person has had 2 experience, an advocate that really knew the Care Act and was able to tell them their rights in a clear manner and was great. The second advocate was called a Care Act advocate, but didn't seem to know anything about the law, and they felt they were quite unhelpful. So it's just about, yeah.
Okay, so advocates are trained. There's an independent advocacy qualification that is completed alongside the City and Guilds, and that qualification comes in several parts. There's the core units, which is where a person trains. So within Voiceability, the expectation is during your first, after 3 months of being employed by Voiceability to do your basic induction training, it's expected you start to work towards your qualification in independent advocacy. The company pays for, and you expect to complete the core units within a year, and then beyond that you have a year to complete every other specialism. So the core units would be advocacy per se, so that gives you unit qualifications, and you're working towards a diploma in independent advocacy, and then you do specialism units for different areas you're working in. And so there's a unit, there's a qualification as a Care Act advocate, there's a qualification as a mental health advocate, there's a qualification as a children and young persons advocate, there's a qualification to work with the RPR, the older people, There are also other units around management and that kind of thing, and we should not be practicing as advocates within those areas without those specialisms.
And without working towards them. Yeah.
Or working towards them. So I mean, I think I've got four specialisms on top of the core units. Doesn't mean I'm a good advocate. It just means I've got it on paper. That's all. I mean, I'm as good as my last gig. If I ask my clients are any good or not. And what we have, and, jokes aside, so it's a serious profession. But then the role, we don't have all the answers. And we can't have all the answers all the time. But what we do make sure, we always know somebody that has got the answers, so we can, as an organisation, we've got a hive of connectivity where we have communities of practice. We meet together and discuss particular areas, specialisms. You have higher qualified. So for Barbara and I, we're known as high level practitioners, which means we are old and also very experienced. And so we do a lot of training. We do a lot of one-to-one support and mentoring for other advocates. So qualification-wise, we work towards it. If you feel that our service has failed you at all, then you have an absolute right to make a complaint and to challenge that, and we will take that extremely seriously. But we can't get it right all of the time. We really do wish we could. Because sometimes it's just the way it works out. I don't know if that answers your question or not, but so yes, qualifications there.
Thank you. Right, we're getting through these really well. So if you have CHC funding for everyone, continuing healthcare funding, or have a personal health budget, can you still access advocacy?
Okay, so for statutory advocacy, it may be that it has to be spot purchased because that would sit. Because for advocacy, much of it is around the healthcare, the social care process. But sometimes a lot of people are part funded by different departments, if you like. And so for any bits of a person's funding that comes from social care, then definitely yes, they will meet the criteria. If they're fully CHC funded and finding difficulty with that process, then again, come to us, talk to us. We will talk to that local authority and see what is possible. And if we can do that, we will do. Barbara, have you got any other?
Yeah, because I do know that there are some, and I do know that in some areas, some areas of the country, Voiceability do have a contract for supporting with CHC funding and possibly personal health budgets, but it is very area specific. So I think what Nick says, like making contact and finding out if it's us, and if it isn't us, who it is. But I do know it's one of those really weird areas where health authorities, NHS and health authorities and ICBs are very reluctant, it seems, to put money into advocacy, and yet as part of the CHC process with the DST, I do know that there is a bit about ticking the box to say that an advocate's been consulted if it's has been invited and used if needed, and then it gets to that bit and they go, we need an advocate, but actually if it isn't a social care piece of work, it doesn't fall under the Care Act, even though there's usually a social worker present. But there are areas of as I say, within the country that Voiceability do have a CHC contract for, so it will definitely be worth asking, and you should be entitled to an advocate. And if your ICB don't fund that, then I think it's about time that we started making some noise about that. And I know Voiceability in my neck of the woods are certainly challenging that with regards to how we support people through CHC process, and certainly around appealing the CHC process with regards to unsuccessful funding that occurs. I think for me, sometimes as an RPR, so that relevant person's representative going into care homes, is I will often, close your ears, Nick, shoehorn CHC work into that role, because it's about making sure that the person's voice is heard within that. But in terms of somebody being in their own homes and CHC funding, it's a bit of a grey area.
We are always quite naughty though. We make every effort. We we push and push and push to, and sometimes we get told off because we shouldn't
There's
be
wiggle
working
room.
some, but we carried on doing it. But if we can, we will. And if you're not sure, just ask. Always ask. Always ask. And if the answer you're getting isn't clear, then ask again. I think as a collective as well, we've talked about kind of the networks that exist. Then your collective here is a very important group of people, and do ensure that collectively you challenge as well, and escalate it. We've got a network of people. If you jointly approach professionals, jointly approach MPs, the House of whatever it takes, because the world of disability, the world of different barriers that exist, there is no equality. It is unequal, and that inequality is shameful, really. And but Barbara and I, we only met each other through our work, but both of us are parents of adults with disabilities. And so as professionals, we do the job because we're passionate about it, but also we understand the challenges that are faced by people trying to work with local authority. And because we're advocates, it doesn't make it any easier. I wish it did. I wish it did, but it doesn't. It doesn't at all. It's so tough. It is so tough. But I think your collectives, what you're doing here is brilliant. It is brilliant. And Barbara and I are thrilled and privileged to be invited to come along and speak to you. But use the power of your network to kick some bottoms, so to speak, to really make it, to push and challenge.
Thank you. Are you okay? There's two more questions, or do you want to stop? Are you okay? Okay, so
Yep.
the first one is one from the chat, and it's a specific situation, so you might not be able to advise personally, but perhaps just around the subject. So I'm under mental health, and I've received very little input, and I've I've had a letter through the post telling me off because of the way I spoke to a new key worker, which has made my anxiety and oh goodness, sorry, I've been to stop, can't speak. Procrastination over this is making me worse than ever. So I guess it's around, if your difficulties have, made difficulties with that communication, what can you then do to put it right, or to be able to continue to have your voice heard? Sorry, I mean.
Yeah, I mean it's a very specific situation, isn't it? I think that any professional should make reasonable adjustments to ensure that communication is as accessible as possible. And I think to receive a letter being told off for the way you've spoken to somebody, obviously we have to take responsibility for our own behaviour, and sometimes I know that clients, that any of us can become so frustrated because we feel we're not being heard, and perhaps we can sound a bit aggressive. Or a bit, but this is a specific situation I don't know anything about at all. But generally, we've got to take our own responsibility for our own actions, of course. But if we need people to make reasonable adjustments, we need to say to them, "You've got to make some adjustments for me." If we feel we need somebody else with us, like an advocate, we need to be saying, because obviously it's a key case where advocacy could have been a massive support, just to help to manage the environment. And so, for my job as a mental health advocate, often I am alongside a client, and I've been into tribunals with judges, and I've had to sort of put my hand up and say to the judge, "Can we have a break, please?" Because my client's becoming unsettled, and nobody's seeing that. But I can see that my poor client's going to get ever so upset in a minute. So just have a little break, things like that. But I'm so sorry to hear that, and it's to get a letter is tough. But I tell you what, if you've got a letter, you've got a chance to reply to that letter.
That's just what I was thinking.
And you've got some fuel there to go back
fuel
to.
there to be able to put something down and maybe give them some suggestions in writing as to how to better meet your needs and how might better be a way to communicate with you and to explain what you might need, or how you shouldn't have to explain your actions, but certainly in terms of how that, and also the impact the letter has had on your well-being as well, because that's not what a mental health professional's role should be to make somebody feel worse.
No,
Thank
it
you.
really shouldn't be. So go on. Yeah, thank you.
Last one.
Right, last question, promise, sorry. Right, right, you say advocacy is not legal advice. Does this mean you can't advise people of their legal rights? For example, the Care Act says this about a situation, or if you feel the social worker is ignoring their rights. I thought that was quite an interesting one, because I know you said you're not there for legal.
Okay, we're not there for legal, as in we're not qualified solicitors. We are not qualified in law. Okay, but what we do know is what people's rights are under the Care Act. So we can challenge within the Care Act framework, within the law. So the Act would state something, and therefore we don't give advice, we can give you the information for you to then take action on that advice. We can work through a list of pros and cons, the benefits and the burdens of taking certain actions. So we are not legal in that sense, but we do know the legal framework in which we're working and in which your rights are upheld. So that's, I think, is the difference. And also, as an organisation, we do have access to a company of solicitors who offer us pro bono work for us to be able to use them of any questions and queries we've got that we feel where the local authority may be in breach of their legal responsibility. So we will be able to take our complex cases or any questions we've got to that company, and they will freely give us some of their legal knowledge and share that with us. So that's kind of, I think, yeah, Nick, where we sit.
I think what you said is absolutely right, and you know, we can escalate things. We do have access to a range of solicitors that will give that formal legal advice and guidance. What we can do as advocacy service is to signpost people to the right legislation. We can help to create understanding on that legislation, so we can see where it sits. We can challenge fellow professionals over things. But if it comes to the need for legal clout, then we are not part of the legal framework of the country. But we are here to be alongside a person as they access that legal framework and information.
I mean, within our role as advocates, there are some circumstances where we do have to instruct solicitors on somebody's behalf, but that's very specific pieces of work that we carry out under statutory advocacy. So if somebody who doesn't want to live at their care home is objecting, for example, has a legal right under Human Rights Act to have representation at the Court of Protection. So that we would be using them under those circumstances. But we would know when we can and when we can't. And if we feel that you would benefit from some legal advice on your own, then we can either speak to them, or there are solicitors out there that might give you some free time, or a legal clinic attached to universities will often be able to give you some additional support.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much also for staying longer to answer all those questions. That is so kind of you. And I think it's been an absolutely fantastic session. And yeah, honestly, thank you so much. It's been really, really good. And for everyone else, I hope we'll see you very soon at the Employment Rights for PA Employers sessions. This is about all the new employment rights that are coming in, and so what you need to know as an employer to make sure you don't run afoul of those. But otherwise, thank you everyone for coming, and we will see you soon, hopefully.
Thanks everyone for having us. It's been a pleasure.
Guys. Take care. Bye-bye.
See ya.